Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you everyone for joining our session today on natural gas safety in public and affordable housing. Our speaker today is Michael Shanley, who is a senior specialist in gas emergency preparedness with Eversource Energy, which is a gas utility provider in Connecticut and Massachusetts. Michael's session today is going to guide us through essential strategies and best practices that are crucial for maintaining safe and reliable natural gas infrastructure in housing communities. Please submit any questions you have, and we'll do our best to answer these throughout the session. Michael, I'm going to go on mute and let you take it from here.
Thank you, Mary. So good afternoon, everyone. Like Mary said, my name is Mike Shanley, Mike Shanley. I'm a senior specialist at Eversource, specifically supporting the gas business in their emergency preparedness department. I've only been with Eversource since February of 2021. But prior to joining Eversource, I had an extensive career in public safety in local municipalities. So just a bit of background, I was a police officer for about 5 years, and I worked for the city of Worcester, which is the second largest city in New England, about 45 minutes west of Boston, for those of you not around this area. In their Department of Emergency Communications and Emergency Management. So I was their director of 911, police and fire dispatch, and emergency management for the 3 years before I joined Eversource. So like I said, I'm happy to join you guys today, happy to present on this information on behalf of Eversource to all of you, really focusing on safety, right? I really enjoy having a safe environment, and Eversource's really guiding principle for everything we do is always safety first and always. So with everything we do and with every decision we make and action that we take, we're always focused on trying to be as safe as possible. So just a bit of background about Eversource for those of you who aren't from the area or might not necessarily know. So we're New England's largest utility. We provide gas, electric, and water service throughout New England. We have about 900. So I only work for the gas business. We have electric utility. We have a water utility. I'm here today specifically to talk about the gas business, though. So we have at Eversource about 900,000 gas customers. Those gas customers are in Massachusetts and Connecticut. We have gas utility. We're the gas utility for 191 cities and towns in Massachusetts and Connecticut. Our overall territory for those gas utilities covers about 5,000 square miles. So, it just gives you a sense of the scale that we're working with up here. And just a couple of little facts to kind of prepare for the presentation here. Eversource Gas, as a company, we have about 12,000 miles of main. So we have a lot of main in the ground, and about 650,000 services. So moving on to, why are we here today? Basically, we're here to talk about natural gas and what we can do to be safe around it, be prepared for any natural gas emergencies. Natural gas is a very reliable source of energy for most of America. American communities, here's a little quote from the American Gas Association, American communities rely on natural gas infrastructure because of decades of planning and investment. 2.6 million miles of natural gas pipelines now deliver energy to 187 million customers daily. America's vast natural gas distribution system enables us to cook our food, to heat and to cool our homes, and more. It's important to remember that people rarely think about natural gas. They really think about how important it is and how much of a value it is to ensure reliable heat, the ability to cook, right? The ability to have electricity in our lives, and that's until it's not available. And so I said electricity, and that's something that sometimes raises a few eyebrows. Electric generation and electric power plants, in large part, especially in New England, I'm only an expert really in the New England area, but we have electricity provided through generation by burning natural gas. So currently in New England, I checked just before I jumped on here, 51% of all electricity being used in New England is being created by burning natural gas at power plants. So it's just another reminder of how necessary and how valuable natural gas is in all of our daily lives. Even if you don't have natural gas service at your house, if you don't have natural gas heat, the electricity that you're using is likely coming from, in some part, from natural gas. Natural gas, for those of you that don't know, right, it's a fossil fuel that was formed deep beneath the Earth's surface, formed through the decomposition of organic matter, and that takes millions and millions of years, right? And then it's extracted from the ground, from underground reservoirs, and then processed, and then leaves behind mostly methane, methane being the key component of natural gas. And for today's purposes, we're only going to be discussing natural gas. The only time that we really discuss something other than natural gas is during that properties and characteristics portions, which you'll see a video that a former coworker of mine who's since retired has put together to really go through the properties and the characteristics and compare them to propane. So why are we here? 4 main points that we're going to go over, or 4 main reasons. We're not necessarily going to go over the first one, but so there was an explosion at an apartment complex in New Jersey in July 2023. That prompted the HAI group to reach out to Eversource to see if we could provide some insight on how we could avoid potential natural gas incidents. So that's really the framework or reason why we're here. But we're also hoping to be able to give everybody an understanding of the natural gas distribution system, how it relates to what you can do to keep your organization and the residents that live in the properties you insure safe. Hopefully provide an understanding of the properties and characteristics of natural gas and how they can be dangerous in certain situations, and to try to improve safety by gaining an understanding of what property managers can do during an emergency and what residents can do if they're concerned about gas-related issues. For example, right, a gas leak, or smell of an odor of gas, or carbon monoxide alarm going off, both inside and outside issues. And so just, as a reminder before we go through it, gas is used safely on a daily basis across this country. We have millions, 137 million customers. It's when it's used correctly and when everything is being done to regulations, it's a very safe, reliable way to heat homes and to provide electricity throughout the country. However, we're going to discuss how it could be harmful in certain situations. Just a little precursor before we start going into this. Any decision that you guys make, or any decision that anyone makes with regards to natural gas, or should always just be following their own agency policies and guidelines. No 2 gas emergencies are the same, right? And really, guidelines and policies and procedures exist to keep people safe. So everyone, if they have policies and procedures regarding responding to or dealing with anything involving natural gas, they should just be following those procedures. All right, so before we get further in, let's just have a little bit of a discussion here, and I'm going to try to make all right, I'm going to make this like a laser pointer here so we can kind of see what I'm talking about. So how does natural gas get to your community? Right, so everyone knows, or I think everyone knows, that natural gas doesn't exist everywhere naturally. It's something that has to be transported to different areas to be used. So starting up at the top of this screen, where I'm using my little pointer as a laser, my mouse as a laser pointer there. That's where we represent where the natural gas is in the ground, right? So it has to be extracted from the ground and brought up into the distribution system, or the transmission system. I apologize. But so producing wells exist, and those wells are used to pump gas up out of the ground and put it into the pipelines. From there, it runs into a compressor stations, which you'll see along the pipeline. The role of a compressor station is really just to make the gas a higher pressure, take it from a lower pressure, compress it, and make it a higher pressure so that it's able to transport further. So it's compressed, it's brought it to a higher pressure, and then it's brought into a refining or a processing plant where impurities or anything else is stripped out of the chemical, or the methane really. And then it's, from that point, it gets put into intrastate transmission lines. It's compressed. You get up to really, really high pressures here, where you're talking high pressures, 700, 800, 1,000 pounds PSI, really high pressure transmission lines. From that point, transmission lines run all throughout the country, bringing gas from where it is naturally to where we can use it on our distribution systems. From that, we as a company and other local distribution companies will tap into those transmission lines at what we call city gate stations. At that city gate station is where it stops being transmission gas and it starts being distribution gas. So that's where we, as Eversource and the other local distribution companies in your territories, would take that gas, put it through regulators. So regulator is what's used to bring it from a higher pressure to a lower pressure, to a pressure where it's safe to live and go throughout your distribution system. It goes into our distribution mains, and then from our distribution mains, goes in through services to potentially another regulator on the house, into households and businesses. There are other areas other than just those producing wells where you're going to have gas, and those are artificially used. So depleted underground areas, like salt domes or underwater empty aquifers will be used to store gas for use in peak times, as well as like a LNG, liquefied natural gas, or liquid propane could potentially be stored offsite. You'll see big tanks that'll have liquefied natural gas, and that's stored to be used during peak demand days to get over the hump of peak demand and make sure that all the companies come through and all the services have gas throughout those really cold days. This is a really high level view. No test at the end of this, but just to give an overview of how the gas transmission to distribution system works before we dive any deeper. So you as property owners or insurers are most likely going to be dealing with a local distribution company. That's what Eversource is. We're a local distribution company. We don't dig in the ground to get gas. We don't manufacture gas. We get gas from a transmission company and provide that to our customers through our distribution system. Eversource is one of many LDCs in the United States. And why are LDCs important to all of you, right? These are the people who are going to be in your territory, who are going to be in your areas, who really understand how that gas distribution system works. They're the owners of it. They're the ones who are going to respond anytime you have a gas odor or anytime you have any gas-related issue. It's very important that, ahead of any incident, that you know who your local distribution company is and you know how to contact them. You know what their emergency number is to reach out in the event that there is something wrong or that there could potentially be something wrong. Most LDCs, again, just speaking for what I'm familiar with in the Northeast, are going to provide training and public awareness information for their territories and for our communities, for our public safety. I know at Eversource, we provide both in-station, meaning we go to the fire stations or the police stations and give trainings to the local first responders to understand what infrastructure lives in their city and how best to respond and techniques to respond and keep themselves and the public safe. As well as we offer an advanced firefighter class, we call it, where we bring firefighters into our training facilities and we let them work with live gas, with fires in live gas situations to really just train, learn techniques, and best prepare them to respond to any emergency that presents itself or any situation that presents itself. And we're going to be working with our local DPWs, our local public works. We're going to be working with excavation contractors and others to just do everything we can to reduce the dangers when we're working around and with natural gas. I'm going to share a video next, just highlighting and showing why natural gas could potentially is something that should be taken seriously and show just how quickly something can escalate. So there is some audio on here eventually.
we're happy to announce our...
All right, so that video that I just showed is an explosion that took place in Bremerton, Washington. Sorry if I mispronounced that, if anyone is from Bremerton on here. But it really just shows the importance of quickly calling 911 and calling your local distribution company and evacuating the residents anytime you suspect a potential gas emergency. So that explosion, actually, to put a little background on it, that was a domestic situation, right? A domestic dispute call that someone ended up kicking a gas line, I believe, and created gas leaking inside of a building. That explosion took place 24 minutes after the gas company had already responded, had already been on scene, and no civilians were injured in that. But it really shows the destructive force of an explosion and shows how how seriously we should take odors of natural gas and potential leaks. How many times have folks on this call heard a report that said, "Oh, the residents smelled gas before there was an explosion"? Right? We have to take those things seriously, and we have to report them and follow our department and our company procedures when we get a report of an odor or any potential gas leak. This could theoretically happen anywhere, right? A domestic dispute turned into an incident that impacted many people. And really the key here was evacuation, right? Life safety is always the most important thing whenever responding to an incident. So, evacuation, rapid evacuation, and just keep in mind that if there's ever a doubt, right, evacuation is never wrong, right? It's never going to be wrong to evacuate people. Did I skip too far? So how can natural gas be dangerous to residents or to employees? Right, I've highlighted, and I really want to keep everybody in mind that when it's used safely, when it's used correctly, and when all the procedures are being followed and things are all acting as normally, natural gas is extremely it's a safe product. It's been used since the 1800s, right? It's been in the ground since the pipelines have been in the ground since the 1800s, and been used to heat and provide electric service to homes, right? But how can it be dangerous? So natural gas is inherently, it's colorless, it's odorless, and it's tasteless. It's basically, natural gas is predominantly methane, huge percents of methane, upwards of 100% methane. But there are other additives that could potentially be in there as well. To make it a little bit safer and following, it's a federal regulation that transmit gas in pipelines has to have an odorant added to it. You'll hear the term mercaptan used. I think the actual scientific name is like methyl mercaptan. But that's what's added to gas. So when you have an odor of natural gas, that's what you're actually smelling. That sulfur smell, that rotten egg smell. It's described as a number of different things, but it's really the what is in the gas to provide any type of odor and any type of awareness that it lives in the air, that it's up in the air, or anywhere that you're living, that you are. I'm sorry. Natural gas is, it's non-toxic. However, it is an asphyxiant, and what that means is that if you are in a confined space and the room is full of natural gas, it displaces the oxygen. So you would suffocate in a situation where natural gas is, you're in a 100% natural gas. Basically, it's an asphyxiant because it displaces oxygen. So best to not be in an environment that has natural gas freely about. Natural gas is lighter than air, and I'm going to show you a video in a handful of slides to demonstrate that. But it's lighter than air, meaning that it rises, right? It has a specific gravity of 0.68. When it's in the air, when it's not confined in a pipeline or anything else, it's going to naturally try to rise. It has an ignition temperature between 1100 and 1200 degrees Fahrenheit. That doesn't sound like it's very low, right? It sounds like, oh, that's a lot, but static electricity is over 1100 degrees. So anything with a spark really is enough to ignite natural gas. And then we also want to be concerned about the byproducts of incomplete combustion. So when natural gas burns completely, or when it's burning efficiently, it's going to produce a blue flame and complete combustion is taking place, and only water vapor and carbon dioxide is left behind, with a few other minuscule byproducts, but generally water vapor and carbon dioxide. However, if it's burning improperly, meaning that it's either too rich or too lean, there's an opportunity for carbon monoxide to be produced, which, as everyone knows, is deadly. It's odorless, it's colorless, and it's like an invisible killer where people don't know that it's in their homes if they have carbon monoxide building up. So that's why it's important that anytime there is a carbon monoxide buildup, that 911 is called. Anytime a carbon monoxide alarm goes off, 911 is called. Potentially the gas company is called to go out and investigate the source. Natural gas is not always flammable. Natural gas is only flammable in a very specific range. And with that, I mean that if it's below the explosive range or above the explosive range, natural gas is not flammable. So natural gas has to be at a mix of between 5 and 15% gas to air to burn. If you're below 5%, it's not explosive. If you're above 15%, it's not explosive. There is a little bit of wiggle room there with additives and with the potential mix of propane or something in there with it, but pure natural gas, explosive between 5 and 15%. That means something to someone who has a gas meter and can read the gas and know what percentage of gas is in the air. But to anyone else or anyone who is not a first responder, not a gas employee, you can't tell with your nose what the percentage of gas is. So we always have to treat any emergency, any odor of gas or any potential gas leak as an emergency until proven otherwise. If you have, so a little bit of background, if you have less than 5% of gas in the air, fire departments will refer to that as lower explosive limit. So you potentially could hear fire department or the gas company refer to something as being 60% LEL, lower explosive unit, LEL. 60% doesn't mean 60% gas. It means really 3%, because we're at 60% of the hitting 5% to a point where the gas would be in that explosive range. The ideal, I'm not a gas mechanic, but the ideal ratio of gas to air for appliances is going to be right about 10%. So at 10% gas, 90% air is really where you get that most efficient, most clean burn, and that's what all of the plumbers who are coming to your houses and what your gas technicians are going to be ensuring is coming out of your pilots when you have an appliance either checked or installed. Another key component for having an explosion, right? We talk about the explosive range, but really you need gas, you need air, you need some type of ignition source. But to have explosion, you also need containment, right? Gas in the air it could ignite on fire, but it's not going to explode. Gas needs to be in a confined space to have an explosion like we saw in that video. So just something to keep in mind.
Hey, Michael, we had a question come through. And the question is, where is a good staging area to designate when evacuating because of the natural gas concerns?
So from the, I believe it's like the DOT Orange Book. I can't remember the exact name of it off the top of my head. I apologize. But they recommend 330 feet as an evacuation air range from natural gas. So somewhere 330 feet away at least.
Thank you.
Actually, I was going to cover that on like slide 22. So getting ahead of the game. Thank you. So I didn't realize this was a pop-up, so I'm just going to rifle through these if I can. Different sources of ignition, right? Anything really that produces a spark or has an active fire going on, right? Like an open flame is going to potentially ignite any natural gas build up inside of an area, as well as static electricity. So it's important that anytime that we suspect or you suspect natural gas inside of a dwelling or inside of any confined area, that we're not using any light switches. Even if the lights are on, leave them on. don't turn the lights off. If you know, it's unlikely that you have a flashlight that's intrinsically safe. So don't use flashlights. Don't ring doorbells. Don't relight a pilot light. Obviously, don't strike a match. Don't do anything that could potentially create a spark and could potentially ignite that or be the ignition source to that natural gas that could potentially be in a confined space. So here's just an image and a diagram, I guess, of a house, a typical layout house, and to try to identify and go through just as an example here of the potential hazard areas and areas that we would be checking and that the fire department would be checking when we respond to a reported odor of natural gas or a reported inside leak. So, you know, in our basement here, we have our hazard area, right? We have where the gas is coming into the house. We have our gas burning furnace. We have our gas burning dryer. We have our gas burning hot water heater. We have our gas burning stove. So naturally, the inclination when thinking that there could be a gas problem or smell gas, let's go investigate. It's a rush right downstairs to see if one of these appliances or your stove is having a potential problem. And that, in likelihood, in most cases, they'll be able to identify that a problem exists or it doesn't exist. But when we consider natural gas, we talked earlier, about 10 minutes ago, about that natural gas wants to rise. It's about 70% or 65% of the weight of air. So rapidly, it's going to go up. And you'll see a video in a few slides demonstrating how, actually one slide, you'll see a video demonstrating how gas rises. But when there's a potential gas leak inside, that gas is going to want to go up. And where's it going to be most likely trapped in these homes, right? Homes are not airtight. So it's most likely going to be trapped somewhere up in the eaves or in the attic or in the any confined space. So you'll see if you call the fire department or you call the gas company to respond to an odor of natural gas, if they don't find anything in the basement when they get there, they're probably going to still want to check all throughout your home, all throughout your properties, specifically the higher floors, as well as anywhere the gas could accumulate, like an attic or in the eaves of the attic. Right, so that maintenance person's going to go in here for an odor, and really they're just going to, do whatever they can do to find out where the gas is coming from. Now, I talked one slide ago about explosive limits. So gas above 15% in the air is not explosive, but the maintenance person's coming in and they open the door and they leave, and they open the door and they leave, and they open the door and they leave, and they come back and they go back and forth, and they do this over the course of a half hour. So there's a possibility and there's a potential where gas was above the explosive limit, but because of the introduction of fresh air into the building, that explosive limit can come down. The gas mix could come down to go into that explosive limit of being below 15%, but above 5%. And, it's just their considerations that your maintenance personnel, that the fire department and that the gas company are going to keep in mind, and they're going to be very vigilant about when they're responding to a scene to make sure that we make it through and solve any problems that exist there. So I'm going to go into I got to pull up another screen to demonstrate. So I mentioned that little precursor. I mentioned that we at Eversource provide in-station training, as well as anything else we can do for our public safety partners to keep them safe and aware of the risks and hazards that exist when dealing with natural gas. So I believe it was during the coronavirus, we weren't really able to get around to everyone because of the social distancing and stuff. So we produced a video. This is a former coworker of mine, Eric Madison, going through the properties of natural gas and explosive limits, and really just summarizing everything that I just went through over the last few slides. But again, Eric Madison, he was a senior specialist here at Eversource in the gas emergency preparedness. Prior to joining Eversource, he was a fire chief for Ever in Western Massachusetts. So I'm just going to share that screen now. play that video.
I'm Eric Madison from Eversource Energy. I'm going to do a few short demonstrations that are really designed at illustrating the properties and characteristics of both natural gas and propane gas. These first two demonstrations illustrate the specific gravity of natural gas and propane gas. More specifically, how you can expect these gases to travel through air during an incident. As we know, the specific gravity of air is 1. Natural gas, the specific gravity is 0.6. In other words, natural gas is lighter than air and will rise in a building. It will rise outdoors. It will rise from the air. This bubble is a good illustration to you of just how fast natural gas will move in a building or will move in the outside air. In fact, if gas is leaking outside of a building, it's best to just let it vent into the outside atmosphere. That's the safest place for it to go. Propane gas, on the other hand, is heavier than air with a specific gravity of 1.5. So propane gas will seek the lowest areas in a building. It'll seek the low areas outside, such as storm drains, manholes, or low-lying areas. So now I'm going to ignite some natural gas bubbles. When I do, I can actually feel the amount of heat coming off of that bubble. Now I'll take propane gas and I'll do the same thing. When the propane gas burns, it's a much more intense flame that I feel, much more heat. And that's simply because propane gas burns at 2,500 BTUs per cubic foot. Natural gas burns at about 1,000 to 1,200 BTUs per cubic foot. You'll get a much hotter fire with propane gas than you do with natural gas. To further demonstrate the specific gravity of natural gas, I'm going to put some natural gas into this beaker. Because natural gas is lighter than air, it won't stay in the beaker. And that's demonstrated by when we put the flame to the beaker, there'll be nothing to burn. Propane, on the other hand, because it's heavier than air, will settle in the beaker. Just like it will settle in low-lying areas of a building, low-lying areas outdoors, manholes, sewer basins, bottom of an elevator shaft, or the basement of a building. In fact, the propane will really stay there until we do something to get it out, to dissipate it. In other words, mix it with enough air that it's no longer dangerous. We'll demonstrate that now with the use of the torch. You notice the propane gas was still there where the natural gas had long since left the beaker. In fact, propane gas, because it's heavier than air, I can fill the beaker with propane, and then I can take the beaker and just like a glass of water, I can pour the propane from one beaker to another. So now what beaker has the propane? Let's first try the one I first put the propane in. Nothing's there. If we move the flame over to the other beaker, you'll notice the propane's there and burns. Understanding the weight of these two gases as compared to air will help you develop a successful and safe scene strategy. To demonstrate the explosive range of natural gas, I'm going to start by putting a little bit of gas into my explosion chamber. I'll try to ignite the gas and you'll see we're getting a spark but no ignition. That's because the amount of gas in the explosion chamber is below the flammable range. It's within the LEL but not within the explosive range. Conversely, if I add a little bit more gas and try to ignite it, we get an ignition. The final illustration for the explosion range, I'm going to fill my explosion chamber with even more gas yet. I'm going to try to attempt to light the top. You'll notice we get a spark but no ignition. That's because it's outside of the flammable range. There's too much gas at the upper end. However, at the lower end, or what could be the lower floors of a building, we get an ignition. This demonstrates how you can have two different atmospheres contained within the same building. One above the explosive range or one below in the explosive range or even below the explosive range. As you can see from these demonstrations, Gas must be at the right mixture to burn or to explode. We've also demonstrated that when you consider the specific gravity, you can have different mixtures all within the same building. Explosive mixtures in one area of the building, while the other area of the building, it's undetectable. Understanding these differences is important to first responders when they're investigating natural gas or propane gas odors. Another characteristic of natural gas that many first responders are not fully aware of, natural gas will displace oxygen. It creates an oxygen-deficient atmosphere. Why is that important? If you're not wearing the protective clothing that you've been supplied, your self-contained breathing apparatus, for example, you could find yourself not only in an explosive atmosphere, but in an oxygen-deficient atmosphere. As we all know, when the body becomes hypoxic, when it's lacking oxygen, some of the early signs of hypoxia is confusion, altered mental status. If you're in an oxygen-deficient atmosphere, your brain might not function properly, helping you recognize that you're in a dangerous atmosphere. Let me demonstrate. I'm simply going to fill the chamber with some natural gas. And we can tell by watching the combustible gas indicator that the oxygen levels are quickly falling. Under OSHA regulations, anything at or below a 19.5% oxygen level is considered oxygen deficient and at risk to the person in that atmosphere. You can see that we're in an explosive atmosphere and far below the 19.5% oxygen level. Remember, this ability of natural gas to create an oxygen-deficient atmosphere, as well as a flammable or explosive atmosphere, is one more reason firefighters need to use all the available personal protective equipment, including their self-contained breathing apparatus. Natural gas burns most efficiently at 10%. When we burn natural gas somewhat above 10% or outside of that efficient range, we get a lot of byproducts of combustion. One byproduct most dangerous to us is carbon monoxide. Today's heating equipment requires a lot of fresh air to support combustion, and it draws that fresh air from outdoors. No longer do we rely on the fresh air in a basement or in a boiler room to supply that combustion. If that fresh air intake becomes partially occluded, like with snow buildup or vines or bees' nest or something along that line, it restricts the amount of oxygen and we end up burning the gas rich. That's where we can build high levels of dangerous carbon monoxide. Let me illustrate. So I'm filling my chamber with a high amount of gas so that when I burn it, it's going to be burning somewhat above 10%. We'll notice on the combustible gas indicator that I'm getting very high readings of carbon monoxide. In fact, it's reading 2,000 parts per million of carbon monoxide. This combustible gas indicator only reads up to 2,000. So we have somewhere above 2,000 parts per million of carbon monoxide within this chamber. As we all know, carbon monoxide has no odor. However, frequently, firefighters will be called to investigate the odor of something burning. And while investigating, they find high levels of carbon monoxide. This is because another byproduct of incomplete combustion is aldehydes. And aldehydes generate a strong combustion odor. If you smell aldehydes, you likely have a carbon monoxide issue too. Some fire departments employ a tactic when they respond to gas calls where they shut off the gas and start venting the building before they know what the level of gas in the building is. This can oftentimes lead to a much more dangerous situation. For example, if a building is above the explosive range, although not a good situation, it's a much more stable environment than a building in the explosive range. By shutting off the gas and venting the building, you could be effectively bringing the gas level in the building back through the explosive range. If you have not secured the ignition sources or completed your evacuation procedures, you're moving into a very dangerous situation. I'm going to fill my building up above the explosive range. Then I'll shut off the gas and we'll start venting the building, all the while we have ignition sources still going. You'll notice when we try to ignite it, we get a sparking, no ignition. That's because we're above the explosive range. So now I'll demonstrate venting the building. Again, after each ventilation, we'll try to ignite the gas. At some point here, we're going to enter back into the explosive range, just as you would by shutting off the gas and venting a building. If a building is above the explosive range, although not good, it's actually safer than a building in the explosive range. By shutting off the gas and venting the gas in the building will pass through the explosive range as it ventilates. This can create a dangerous situation if ignition sources have not been secured and the evacuations are not complete. It is important to evaluate the scene before you employ tactics. This way, the strategy you develop will be the safest one possible. This next demonstration will illustrate the flame propagation of natural gas. Natural gas burns fastest in an upward direction, next fastest side to side, but slowest in a downward direction. This is why a gas explosion with a low point ignition will cause greater damage than an explosion with a high point ignition. The first ignition is going to be igniting at the top and burning in a downward direction. You notice we could almost count 1 1,000, 2 1,000 as we watch the flame move down the chamber. The next demonstration, will ignite it from the bottom, given the same amount of gas. Watch how much faster the flame moves from the bottom upward than the flame did moving downward. Also, watch the lid. We'll get more movement out of the lid because we create more pressure, burning the fuel faster. The last one I'm going to do is we'll ignite it from the middle. This way you can watch the flame move upward and downward at the same time. Now it's a small chamber, it happens quickly, but you can see it. The purpose of these demonstrations was to help you gain a better understanding of the properties and characteristics of natural gas. I hope these illustrations will assist you in operating more effectively and safer at emergency scenes.
All right, so that was just a review of the different properties and characteristics of natural gas. And so, like I said, we've gone through the distribution system and how gas is distributed. And we've gone through the properties of natural gas and the characteristics of natural gas. And so, right, we've identified that natural gas is potential, when it's leaking or someone smells natural gas, there is a potential emergency that needs to be investigated and treated as an emergency. So the next, on the wrong thing. So the next thing we're going to go over, really the last thing here, is what can we do and what can you do to try to control those issues. So really the number one thing that you can do is just create a culture of safety. And we'll go over all of these, but get it ingrained in your people to call DigSafe or call before you dig or 811, whatever your state calls it. I know we have call before you dig in Connecticut and DigSafe in Massachusetts, just to they might have a different name in the states that you're operating in as well. But call 811, call that line to have the ground mapped out before any excavation or any digging is done. If there's an emergency, call 911. Notify your local gas company, know what your limitations are, and just be aware of what gases you have on site. So, as I said, call 811, right? Call DigSafe, call before you dig. It's really anytime you're digging, anytime that you're doing anything on your properties involving really changing the soil at all, changing anything in the ground, you should be calling DigSafe. It's a requirement. It's a law that DigSafe has to be called at least. I got something in chat. I'm sorry, but at least it is going to be really in everybody's best interest to call DigSafe to make sure they know what's underground before digging in. Again, I say it's a law. I don't know the requirements in all of the territories across the country, but like, for example, in Massachusetts, violation of the DigSafe regulations according to the DigSafe website, could result if there's an issue caused to natural gas distribution or a hit on natural gas distribution. It says that there's your potential civil penalty up to $200,000 for the infraction. So it's something that's taken very seriously, and it's a service for everyone to use before digging, right? And so according to PHMSA, the Pipeline Hazardous Material Safety Administration, research has revealed that if someone calls 811 before they dig, there's a 99% chance that they avoid any incident, injury, or harm to the environment, or potential death. And that's, again, this is for anything. You should be calling DigSafe. So different states have different requirements for our two operating companies, we actually have three operating companies, but in the two states that we operate in, it varies 48 hours to 72 hours ahead of any planned work that they have to call. But just make sure that you're calling DigSafe before any diggings. You're telling the people who you are communicating with, who you're insuring, your property managers. If they're going to be having any work done on site, make sure that DigSafe was called, and make sure that ample time is given to ensure that services are marked out prior to any work being done. And that's for anything. So here's an example here of someone didn't call DigSafe, potentially. I don't know if they called DigSafe, but I don't believe they called DigSafe, and they didn't call DigSafe, and they went to move a mailbox. So something as simple as digging and replacing your mailbox, they hit a line, ended up causing a fire, and this is a bad day for everyone, right? The fire department has to come out and deal with this. The homeowner or whoever was doing the work there is going to be paying fines. Luckily, I don't believe anybody was hurt in this situation, but I mean, the other thing to look at here is, this homeowner is lucky, kind of, that when they were digging, they only hit the gas line. Because if you look over here to the other side of their driveway, you got a transformer on a skid here, right? There's going to be some underground electric cable that's running here as well, that this homeowner or whoever was doing this work might not necessarily have known, which way that electric line flows. They could have hit that as well. So DigSafe is going to make sure that they're mapping out everything, and the damage prevention folks who come out to mark up the lines for the gas utility, for the electric utility, for the water utility, even for your cable and telephone in some communities, they're going to mark that out so you know what's underground and so that nothing is hit. So we pulled together an example here for the group to go through and just see, why DigSafe is important, right? Nothing happened here. This is just a property in Connecticut. And so it's really, looking at this, where would you assume as the property manager, if you didn't know, where are you going to assume that gas main goes, right? Gas service, there's gas service in this high rise. So where do we assume that it goes, right? The mains generally are going to go down streets. So do we assume that it comes up here and goes somewhere in the parking lot and then goes into here, or does it come from this street, or right? You don't know. No one knows unless they call DigSafe, right? There's a possibility. Here's one area where it could have gone down Walden Ave and come in through that parking lot, or does it go up through this person's backyard? Without calling DigSafe, it's just assumptions. We don't know. The property owner or the property manager doesn't necessarily know 100% where it goes. So in this case, DigSafe was called out, shows where the gas line is, and we can see here that the gas line actually goes through, the long way. It doesn't come off of the street like you would expect, and that really just highlights the fact that distribution mains and service laterals can really be anywhere, right? They can be in streets, they can be in parking lots, driveways, grassy areas, right-of-ways. They can be anywhere. I mentioned that we've been using natural gas or manufactured gas in the United States since the 1800s. City layouts have changed in the last 150 years. So where a street used to exist and the gas main was put in, that street might have completely changed, and the gas main is now going down an area that you wouldn't necessarily expect, or services are going around areas that you wouldn't necessarily expect. So it just highlights the importance of calling DigSafe, calling the call before you dig number, calling 811 prior to any excavation that you have. Pipelines also are all kinds of different materials, all types of different sizes, so they can really be anything. You could run into cast iron, coated steel, unprotected steel, plastic. There's all types of different. So even if, if you're digging, not calling dig safe, you don't necessarily know what's underground. You don't know what you're running into. There's no reason to be digging ever without calling dig safe or call before you dig or 811. Again, whatever the entity is that manages that in your territory, in your state. Even if just hand digging, it's a lot of gas service lines coming off of the main running from the street to a house are going to be plastic. And a lot of those, you'll find 1/2-inch plastic pipes. Just someone digging with a shovel could go right through that. It's just, there's no reason to be digging without calling dig safe, right? Just highlighting that. One other fact, I guess, or a little piece of information here, pipe depths are going to vary as well. So different states and different companies are going to have different regulations and standard system designs that they're using. So a lot of our distribution pipes are going to be 36 inches deep. That's when we put them in, right? Road improvements could change that, right? All of a sudden, the city could go and the DPW could go and reduce the grade on some streets, and now instead of being 36 inches deep, now it's 2.5 feet deep instead of 3 feet. Or, at the service, it could be as low as 18 or 12 inches deep. And that's different, the way different operating companies work and the way different states have their regulations. And then even with regulations and even with standard system designs, there's always going to be variances to distribution systems. There's always going to be, out of 1,000 services, one of them is going to be different. One of them, there's going to be some situation that led the construction crew to put it in a different way. That's why proper record keeping and calling dig safe so that you can access those proper records is going to be vital anytime that you're going to be doing, or that work is going to be being conducted on properties. So in addition to calling dig safe ahead of an incident, anytime that we recognize that there's an odor of natural gas or a potential gas leak, it's important that you call 911. The fire department is going to respond much sooner than a gas company is going to. Even though we're going to meet our standards, we're going to meet our regulations, we're going to be there as soon as we possibly can when called. The fire departments have much faster response times. So really just highlighting, just call 911. If you smell gas, or if your resident reports smelling gas, call 911, get the fire department out there, and try not to use any ignition sources. Something that I mentioned, I used to be I was the director of one of the largest 911 centers in New England. And, just something, if you think you might have to call 911, just call, right? If there's a doubt, if there's a question that maybe we should call 911, just call 911. Let the police department, in this case, let the fire department be the ones to determine that there was no emergency. Don't put that call on yourselves. Follow your procedures, and hopefully your procedures are at the recognition of a potential gas emergency. Call 911. Call the local distribution company. Make sure that phone number for your local distribution company is available for your employees and for your residents, because the sooner you call, the better, right? We'll be able to provide information as soon as possible. We'll be able to respond as quickly as we possibly can, but we need to get a call to respond. A lot of 911 centers will have a protocol that when they get called for gas, they're going to call the gas distribution company, but it's something that, as large building property managers and insurance companies, you can pass that on to your property managers, that they should have that number for the gas company available when they smell gas. Call 911 first, and then notify the gas company. Gas companies, we have the ability to expand our response as needed, right? We have mutual aid compacts. If we have a large scale incident that we need to bring in 100 or 1,000 service techs, we're going to do that. We're going to do everything we can to restore service as quickly as possible in the event of an outage. For us, and hopefully for you, life safety is always going to be the most important and most foremost thing on your minds, right? We're going to do everything we can to preserve life, and then do everything we can to preserve property. Evacuation, keep in mind, evacuation of a building or evacuation from an area is never going to be the wrong decision to make. If you think that it's an unsafe area, make that evacuation. And don't take any unnecessary risks, right? Recognize that you're not going to be the subject matter experts for natural gas situations. Call the fire department, call the gas company, reach out to those support mechanisms that are in existence. If you decide to to request an evacuation or to do an evacuation on the building, just make some considerations there and remember about avoiding ignition sources. So don't use electronic ignition devices, don't use PA systems, don't use megaphones, don't ring doorbells, don't use fire alarm systems. And from that question earlier, again, the DOT guidebook for hazardous materials recommends being at least 330 feet away from the area once they're evacuated. So we get called, Eversource or whoever your local distribution company is called to the scene. There's a potential inside leak. So the gas company is going to show up. They're going to, we're going to call the gas company. We're going to make sure that we're on the way. We're going to, if necessary, evacuate those occupants. We're going to use caution not to use any ignition sources. And potentially the gas company is going to request the electric utility to turn power off for those, that area or that specific service if gas is found in the building and is over that explosive limit to, again, just eliminate ignition sources. With this, just keep in mind, right? Just remember, knowing what your limitations are. So, find out what the property managers of the buildings that you insure are currently doing when they have an odor of natural gas. Do they know? When they get called for an odor of natural gas, are your property managers, are they following through on everything that is being reported, right? Just a note that I have in the back of my head here is when we have, not necessarily, everyone doesn't necessarily know exactly what natural gas smells like. So it could just be they're reporting a weird odor, right? They're reporting, hey, I smell a dead animal, right? That could potentially be, that the property managers and whoever is responding or the fire department, right, should be considering that odor of natural gas, that odor of potentially a dead animal, could that actually be natural gas? Could that be something that we need to investigate for an inside leak? All right, so just different things that have been reported to us as a company. Everyone should be considering those. And then for exterior leaks, right, natural gas in an outside underground pipe, it's going to usually try to rise, right? There are different humidity issues and temperatures that maybe it's going to be a little bit variable, but generally natural gas wants to go up. It's, most times there's an outside leak, natural gas wants to go up into the atmosphere because it is lighter than air. So really, as natural gas is going up, there could be a potentially hazardous in concentration above where that gas leak is. There also could potentially be hazardous concentration or an explosive concentration below where that gas leak is, below the level of the ground there, because the gas is coming from under the ground up. So we need to just, treat that area around there as potentially hazardous. Stay away from that area. Let the fire department, let the gas company respond and check that area. So gas underground, also it's going to migrate just like water is going to migrate, not just up, it's going to go left and right. So natural gas really could follow water lines, could follow sewer lines, could follow communication lines, could follow anything underground, just following that path of least resistance. So it's possible that a building, the building itself that we're responding to might not even have gas, right? But the gas could be migrating in through a sewer line or through any crack in the foundation even, and just really that migration, gas can migrate and go from the point of the leak through the point that path of least resistant. There's also something that everyone should consider, and that is the fact that gas in and of itself is odorless. We add mercaptan as an odorant to make that gas. Everyone be aware that gas is in the area when it's out of its pipeline or out of where it should be. There is a possibility that odorant can be stripped out through the soil as well. So there's specific soil types that can strip odorant out. So that's why it's just important to anytime there's a carbon monoxide or anything going on where there's a potential gas leak, call the gas company, call 911, get us there with our gauges, with our CGIs, combustible gas indicators. I used that term earlier and I didn't say what it was. CGI is a combustible gas indicator. It's that meter that Eric was using in the video to show the percentage of gas and the percentage of carbon monoxide in that space that he was using. Let us use those so that we can make a more accurate assessment of if gas is present and what level of gas is present. We're also going to, when we respond, we're going to do what we call a 6-pack. So basically what that means is we get called to go to, one address for a potential gas leak or an odor of natural gas. We're not just going to stay there. We're going to go, a house to the left, a house to the right. We're going to go across the street. We're going to go a house to the left there, or a building to the right there. We're going to make sure that we're checking really 6 properties, and then just continuing going out if we continue to get gas reads. And just one note to kind of close this little portion out here is that more explosions occur in buildings due to gas migration than due to leaks originating inside the building themselves. Right. So again, just more explosions in buildings occur due to gas migrating into the building from an outside leak than from leaks occurring inside the buildings themselves. So that's why any odor of natural gas, it's just important to call and, get that on record and get someone out there to make sure that gas leak is not hazardous, or make sure that if a gas leak exists, that it can be resolved and not present any hazard. We do, as a gas company, and I'm sure that all of the LDCs in your area as well, perform routine surveys for all of our mains to check for leaks throughout the heating season. As temperatures change, right up here we get frost and the ground moves a little bit, so we're constantly doing leak survey to try to identify any leaks before anybody even smells them or would recognize a leak. And I'm realizing that I read through all this without going through these bullet points. So again, just the concentration of gas in the immediate area of an outdoor leak may be hazardous. If the soil is packed hard or frozen, the gas might not be able to vent directly to the surface and will search for another way out. Natural gas can migrate along pipelines until it reaches a point where the soil is less dense and then could come out. And gas may follow a service pipe into a foundation wall and enter the building through a crack and void. So just all considerations to make. And so what's going to happen when we get there, right? So we get a call, we smell gas, or there was a hit line. So what are you going to expect from a gas company when they respond? And really, you should expect a thorough investigation. You should expect us to go through the area, to check inside of any buildings where we would anticipate gas to build up. We're going to make a determination on if natural gas is involved. So we'll get called. I don't know the percentage of calls, but we will get called for odors of natural gas that will end up being a propane leak from someone's tank or from a grill, and we can identify that that's not natural gas, it's a propane, and support the first responders through whatever they need there. It will ensure that all of the systems are safe, that appliances are working. Will ensure communication with occupants and the responsible party, determining if any findings that we have, if anything necessitates a follow-up. We're going to repair any of our own equipment if necessary. If we find appliances that are not working correctly, if we find a boiler that is not burning at the correct percentage, we're going to do this thing called red tagging it, which basically we're going to lock it out and tell that property owner or that homeowner that they need to have a plumber come out or someone licensed to repair that appliance to get it back into working condition and be safe, right? We'll see that on carbon monoxide calls where an appliance is not working correctly, needs to be put out of service so that carbon monoxide is not continuously pumped into the house, right? And then once everything is repaired and we've put everything back into working order, we're going to relight all the appliances. We're going to get that meter back working. And really, all of this just goes to our guiding principle of safety first and always. That's always the first thing on our mind. It's the most foremost thing on our mind. And our mission really is to just make sure that we have, safety of our customers and preserving their property as the most important thing that we're doing on a day-to-day basis. And really that's what you should expect from us, and you should expect from any LDC or any local distribution company that you call to the scene to support you. Do everything that they can and everything that we can to give you the tools and give you all the information and make sure that we leave that situation safe. Make sure the situation is resolved and we leave it in your hands with a safe environment. So really, that brings me to the end of the presentation. We have, I think, 5 or 6 minutes. If anybody has any questions or something that I didn't that I went over too in detail that you need me to dumb down, or the other way around, that I didn't go into enough detail and you want me to dig into a little bit deeper, please let me know.
We did have a statement come through saying for gas leaks, you want to make sure you evacuate upwind from the leak. So if you just wanted to give us your input on that statement.
Yeah, everything's situationally dependent, right? If it's a high pressure, if, for example, I mentioned that you have transmission lines that are potentially running through your communities. Again, I don't know all the communities involved here, but I assume it's a pretty diverse crew here. If you talk about hitting a transmission line running at 1,000 PSI, that is going to send gas flying, right? There's going to be gas 400 feet in the air. Don't quote me on that. That's an estimation. I'm not an engineer, but you're going to have, that's very high pressure gas going up. You're going to have a lot of gas put into the atmosphere, put into the area very quickly. So yeah, there would be a potential that neighboring addresses could have gas blown into them. And that's, that's on the worst end. But like I said, evacuation's never going to be the wrong thing, right? You got your residents out in the cold for a little bit until the fire department got there to ensure that there's no there's no natural gas in the building is better than having them, right? We know, I don't need to go any further on that, right? So yeah, evacuation is never going to be a bad idea, but really it's going to be situational dependent and relying on, I know that like when, again, locally, fire departments will respond with their gas migration chemical migration software and really get an understanding of where they expect that chemical to be going with the wind direction and wind speeds, which can more educate that. But yeah, there is a potential that an outside gas leak can cause gas to migrate inside and build up in a confined space and create an explosive environment.
Okay, thank you. I am not seeing any other questions. So with that,
if anyone has one, I think Andrew mentioned that there is a possibility to email either you or Andrew to have questions answered later. Just get those over to me and I'll get them back as quickly as I possibly can.
yes, please do. If anyone has any questions after the session, just follow up with us and we'll get you those answers. So thank you so much, Michael, for your expertise on this topic. We do really appreciate you sharing your knowledge with us today. Thank you everyone for attending, and we look forward to seeing you all in our next session.
Thanks, I appreciate it. Have a good day, everyone.